All right, so we have our controller servlet completed. Let's go ahead and focus in on our JSP page now. So in our project, in our web content folder, let's go ahead and create a new file for our JSP. So I'll right click, I'll say new file. And for the name of the file, I'll call it liststudents.jsp. And once I'm happy with that, I'll hit OK. And now we have this empty file here, and we need to go ahead and add some information to it. So the first thing we need to do is our JSP is going to make use of some Java packages. So I need to do an import. So I need to import java.util.star because I'm going to use list and array list, and also some of my own custom classes from my package com love to code web Jdbc. So this is basically just an import for two packages. And remember, in JSP, we can import multiple packages by giving a comma delimited list of package names. All right, so we have the packages here. Now I'll just do my very basic HTML setup work. So I'll set up my HTML head and I'll set up my HTML body. All right, so we have our general HTML housekeeping taken care of. Let me just set up a title here for this page. I'll call it Student Tracker App. All right, so that part's taken care of. Now what I want to do is actually make use of that request object and use some of its data. So I'll set up a JSP scriptlet, and I want to get the list of students from that request attribute that was passed over by the servlet. So I know the servlet has a list of students that it put into that request object. So I'll simply say the students equals, and then I'll retrieve that information and I'll downcast it. So I'll say list student, and I'll say request.getAttribute, and I'll give the attribute name that was used by the servlet. So it's student underscore list. And that will give me a handle to the students. Now, I always like to go into the servlet source code and just verify that I have the correct attribute name. So I'll swing back over to the servlet source code for my student controller servlet, and I'll move down to the section where we did our request dispatcher. And here we go. Great. So this lines 58 and 59. This is where we set the students in the request attribute, and note here what's highlighted, student underscore list. So that's the same attribute name. So just make sure you follow that pattern there, student underscore list. Good. So now we have the list of students. So let me stretch out, get some white space here. And now what I always like to do is just a very simple proof of concept that, hey, we can get the data. So before I get into displaying the actual HTML table, I just want to dump out the students just so it can print the information to the browser, just to make sure that, hey, we can actually get some data. And the output will be ugly, but at least we can verify that we have data right now from that servlet. So let me go ahead and run this servlet. So student controller servlet, right click. I'll choose run as, and I'll choose run on server. All right, so here's the output. So our servlet just ran. So again, remember our servlet talks to the database util, gets that list of students, forwards it over to the JSP. And right now our JSP is just very simple. We're just dumping out the list of students. And again, it's really, really ugly right now. But don't worry, we'll actually get into all the HTML table stuff. But again, I just like to make sure that we can get the data and we can get it to the JSP. Now, this is just more of a making things look pretty inside the house right now. That's all. All right, so let's go ahead and move back into our JSP. And now we actually want to build the HTML table. And so I'll kind of work on my HTML page. We'll actually make use of some style sheets a little later on. But for now, I'll go ahead and just kind of lay out some of the content here for this HTML page. And we'll apply some styles in the following video. All right, so here I'll just set up some divs. So divs are basically just little containers or placeholders for putting information or managing information on an HTML page. So we're going to use style sheets later. So I'm just going to make use of some divs. So the wrapper for the header. So our header will show up H2 as Fubar University. And again, stretch out, get some white space here. Then I'll go ahead and start working on my main content div. So this is my container here. And then the div for this one will be content. And again, we'll apply CSS styles for these given items. But for now, we're just laying it out. The main part here is just focusing on building out our table. So we want to have an HTML table that'll give the students first name, last name, and email address. So to handle that, I'll first, in my table here, I'll set up a table row and I'll set up the table headers. So just so we can see the actual headers here for the table. So again, we'll have first name. Then I'll just copy paste this line and then paste it a couple of times here. And then here we'll have it for last name. And then we'll also have it for email. Okay, great. So this takes care of our headers right now for our HTML table. So this looks good so far. Now what I want to do is move down a bit and then actually loop through that list of students and put this information in different table rows. So here I'll just do a for loop. I'll say student, temp student, colon, the students. Now, the students, you may wonder, well, where did that come from? Well, that's the variable that we set up earlier in this JSP page. So on line 11, we have the students. That's the list that we retrieved from that request attribute. So that's the list of students that we're looping over right now. So I just have my open curly brace and my close curly brace. And then basically inside of this loop, this is where we're going to print out the student's first name, last name, and email address. So I'll set up a table row for this. And then I'll set up table data. So table data, I'll make use of a JSP expression. So angle bracket % with an equal. And I'll say temp student dot get first name. All right, so that'll give me the first name for the student. And then I'll copy this line and I'll paste it a couple of times here. And so here I'll have a get last name and then also get email. All right, good. So there's the email portion of it. So that's basically the looping portion here for our table. So this looks really good. So here's our table. We have our table headers up top, and then we loop through that list of students and we print out the first name, last name, and email address. So this looks really, really good. I'm excited about this right now. All right, so let's save it and let's test it out. So all I have to do is go back to my previous screen here, my browser screen here for the servlet, and all I have to do is simply reload. Remember with JSPs, if you change it, there's no need to rerun the code. You simply just refresh and there you go. So bam, I love this. So here's our table for Fubar University. We have our 5 students listed out. So this is really, really cool. So we have this information in tabular data. Now, it's a little ugly right now. The table's kind of plain. It's kind of blah. Doesn't really match the screenshots we had earlier. But don't worry. In the following video, I'll show you how to apply cascading style sheets to this table to make it look pretty, to make it look beautiful. All right, so I'm having a lot of fun here. So in the next video, we'll cover CSS and I'll show you how to apply those styles in our JSP page. All right, I'll see you soon.